Good morning. Nope, not yet. Good morning, philosophers. I may have to shut my door. If the childers downstairs are having issues, we'll see how it goes. Let's continue reading. 3-Minute Therapy. If you rate yourself, you'll berate yourself. I think I've already read this section. We all know people who continually criticize themselves. Yep, I've already read that. Next section, secondhand self-esteem. Frequently, a person's craving for self-esteem is linked to the approval of another person, often a spouse or parent. Tara, a strikingly attractive 41-year-old, was an executive secretary for a Madison Avenue advertising firm. She had a daughter in high school and a son in elementary school. She was tall, thin, and might have been taken for a model. Although she mentioned that she enjoyed going out with her husband and another couple on Saturday nights, she mostly just read me a litany of problems and gloomy feelings. Quote, I get nervous about everything, and then I get depressed. I worry about illness, and I also worry about work situations. I'm eaten up with envy for other people who have certain things better than I do. I hate meeting new people. I cry easily at movies and weddings, and always hate myself for crying. I constantly wish I were someone else. I feel like a weakling. I just despise the way I look. I can't relax, and I feel intimidated by my boss. The tone of Tara's voice suggested that she was giving herself a good scolding, which she seemed ready to continue at some length. Sounds like a lot to deal with, I interrupted. Out of all that, what seems to bother you the most these days? Hard to say. I guess it's putting up with my mother when she comes to stay with us. She's very critical, and it's usually directed at me. It's amazing how blind we can be to the causes of our issues. She's very critical, and it's usually directed at me. Like last night, she was complaining that the house was a mess. I know I could do a better job at keeping the house clean, but I just can't find the time. My mother never went out to work, so she had all the time she needed to keep a spotless home. But somehow I feel that she's right. I really should keep the house neat and clean. I'm always uncomfortable in a messy house. Let's assume, as you claim, that your house is a holy mess. That's easy, she said. And you're depressed about it. Yes, I am. This means you have a must in there somewhere. You mean like I must have a clean house? Exactly. I do put myself down when I see dust or papers around the house, Tara confessed. I do feel crummy about myself. But assuming the worst, that you really are a slovenly housekeeper, that's only one of many things in your life, so it doesn't follow that you as a total person are no good. But I'm not good at anything. I'm a lousy mother. My kids are not as personable as Marita's kids, and I'm always making faux pas at work and putting my foot in my mouth. But even if that's all true, he said, I suspect you're being perfectionistic in your self-judgments. You still have the potential to change, and your potential is an aspect of you. If you actualize your potential and improve in some of these areas, then we'll have additional things you're good at. Furthermore, in the future, you might discover endeavors you never tried before that you find you have some talent for. I pointed out to Tara another reason that making mistakes does not prove she is completely rotten, just that she has succeeded at keeping herself alive, not gotten killed in a car accident, not poisoned herself, or walked in front of a truck proves that she doesn't always and only make mistakes or perform badly. Some of Tara's musts were, I must have my mother approve of my housekeeping, or else I'm worthless. I have to get all my cleaning done, or else I turn into a worm. I should keep my house looking better than it does, otherwise I'm a lesser person. I have got to do it immediately, or it proves I'm a total failure. After disputing her musts, Tara replaced them with these conclusions. Although my mother's approval is preferable, I can fully accept myself with her criticism. I would like to get all my cleaning done, but if I don't, it mainly shows that I'm just an imperfect person acting imperfectly. I wish my house looked better, but a less neat house doesn't mean I'm less of a total person. I prefer to shape up shape up my house right now, and at worst I've failed in the house cleaning, but that failure does not measure my total essence. Tara's 3-minute exercise. Tara quickly saw the point, and we soon began working on 3-minute exercises. Here's one that she found particularly helpful. A. Activating event. My mother criticizes me and says the house looks as if I hadn't cleaned for a month when in fact I cleaned yesterday. B. Irrational. You need to kick that woman out of your house. That's what you need to do. Problem solved. B. Irrational belief. I must keep a spotlessly clean house and avoid my mother's criticism or else I'm no good. C. Emotional consequences. Hurt and depression. D. Disputing. What's the evidence I must keep a spotlessly clean house and avoid my mother's criticism or become no good? E. Effective new thinking. Although I strongly prefer to keep a spotless house, I can find no reason why I must. Being an imperfect human, I will act imperfectly in many ways, so it's understandable that I may not have a perfectly clean house. And if my mother thinks I'm no good, that's sad, but that's her opinion, and doesn't magically turn me into a worm. I'm still me, not what she thinks is me. My mother isn't perfect either, nobody is. I'm never less of a person no matter how badly I do, and no matter who disapproves of me. I can fully accept myself and get a lot out of life even with a flawed house. Here's a golden opportunity to practice working on accepting myself unconditionally, in spite of my flawed behavior, and in spite of criticism from others. It's unfortunate that my house is deficient, but it's not awful, terrible, or horrible. F. New feeling. Concern and mild disappointment, rather than hurt or depression. From self-rating to self-acceptance. The goal of feeling good about yourself is a trap. If people criticize you, or if you don't live up to your standards, you see yourself as worthless and start to feel hopeless. When you perform well in the eyes of yourself or others, you tend to think you must continue to prove yourself to maintain your self-esteem, so you feel insecure even when you're doing well. You can use the techniques described in this chapter to root out your basic problem, self-rating. Instead of rating yourself, accept yourself just as you are, a fallible human who can enjoy life no matter how poorly you perform and no matter who disapproves. Seems to be one extreme of a belief about yourself. I haven't formed conclusive thoughts on that yet. Seems like that could lead to bad things in the other direction, but I'll keep thinking about it. Chapter 4. Marriage. Vicious and delicious circles. Marriages are said to be, this is a quote from Thomas Zaz, The Untamed Tongue. Marriages are said to be made in heaven, which may be why they don't work here on earth. Like most married couples, Carol and Steve agreed perfectly on what was wrong with their marriage. The other person's reprehensible behavior. As they entered my office for the first time, I immediately noticed their physical resemblance. They could have passed for brother and sister. They were both lean, dark-haired, and smartly dressed. I introduced myself and offered a friendly handshake. They both responded mechanically and without warmth. Both answered my questions sullenly and refused to be drawn into free-flowing conversation. In their answers, they accused each other of various relationship crimes. Carol, 32, was trying to balance a new career with raising a young child. She complained bitterly that Steve rarely talked to her, was over-involved in his work, and spent too many evenings away from home. She sounded distant, as though she had already given up on the relationship. Steve, a year older than Carol, was a family practice physician. He lamented that Carol no longer responded to his amorous advances, never took his child-rearing advice seriously, and was under the thumb of her mother. He sounded hurt and betrayed. I don't know why women have been, well, I know why they've probably been taught that it's an acceptable goal to have a child as well as a career. As if a career isn't a child. They've just been told they can somehow magically have time for 2 careers. It's a big part of the problem with society today. Something only you can do. I plunged in and gave them their first lesson in healthy relating and emoting. Just as it was explained by the Roman philosopher Epictetus over 2,000 years ago, only you can upset yourself about events. The events themselves, no matter how obnoxious, can never upset you. But when my wife rejects my sexual, I was just talking to my wife about this actually in relation to how we relate to our kids, about how it's colloquial and habit and just how it's always been said to us, and so that's how we've always said it ourselves. Somebody does something that results in us feeling angry, we'll tell the person, that makes me feel angry, that hurts my feelings. And I was just talking to my wife about sort of changing that language to be more precise. It's like, after you did that, I'm feeling angry is a more accurate way of saying that doesn't put the causality for your internal emotional state on them, because that's not how it works. That's to abrogate your own control over your own emotional state. And if you use that language, and if you believe that you don't have control over your emotional state, then in a way you're giving the other person control over your emotional state and then complaining about how they use it, which is extra absurd, right? Like, if you don't like how they're using your emotional state, why are you handing them control over it? So we're going to try and raise our children to not have that sort of built-in, you make me feel blah, kind of built-in assumption. See how it goes. Quote, but when my wife rejects my sexual advances night after night, month after month, that's very, very disappointing, Steve interrupted, sitting on his anger. Yes, it is, I said supportively. In fact, it's infuriating, Steve added, getting more visibly upset. You choose to infuriate yourself about it, I corrected, holding my ground. Now he began to get angry with me. I choose to infuriate myself about it? Carol's the one who chooses which TV channel to watch all night, Steve replied sarcastically. Yes, but you choose your reaction to that. Suppose 100 husbands like you all had wives like Carol who rejected their sexual advances every night. Would all 100 of them be equally upset? Well, maybe not equally. Even I'm in a forgiving mood at times, Steve said thoughtfully, his anger diminishing. Right. Some would be even angrier than you. Others would feel about equally as angry. Some would feel only mildly angry, and one or two would just feel keenly disappointed without becoming angry at all. I think I see what you mean. And you can choose to feel keenly disappointed without becoming furious. Like most people, Steve wasn't immediately convinced of this, but he was intrigued enough to give the idea a chance. Taking the must out of your marriage. Gross. This word. Suppose that you, like Carol and Steve, and most human beings on the surface of this planet, believe that your partner is upsetting you. What can you do? You can tackle the problem in 3 stages. 1. Take responsibility for your upset. 2. Identify your musts. 3. Dispute your musts. 1. Okay, now we're going to explain them. 1. Take responsibility for your upset. Face the fact that no one else can ever upset you. Only you can upset yourself. No one can get into your gut and churn it up. Only you can do that by the way you think. 2. Identify your musts. Once you have fully acknowledged that only you can upset your own emotions, identify precisely what you're telling yourself. The culprit can usually be found in one of 3 basic musts. Must number 1, a demand on oneself. I must do well by my mate and get her approval, or I'm no good. Must number 2, a demand on others. My mate must treat me well, or she's no good. Must number 3, a demand on situations or on the universe. The relationship must go well, or life's no good. Try to discover what you're demanding of yourself, your partner, and your relationship. Not until you've identified your key must can you most effectively reduce your distress. As is often the case with feuding couples, Steve's and Carol's self-defeating thinking included all 3 musts. Steve's must number 1. Because Carol is rejecting me, that conclusively proves what I've always suspected, that I'm just not good enough for her and will never have the loving, supportive wife that I must have. Carol's must number 1. I must have Steve's undivided attention, and if I don't get it, that means he doesn't care for me at all, and that I'm worthless. Steve's must number 2. Since I'm her husband and she's my wife, and I feel like having sex, she must always comply, or else she's a louse and deserves to roast in hell. Carol's must number 2. Steve should spend more time at home with the family, and he's a louse because he doesn't. Projection. Steve's must number 3. The relationship must provide me with sexual satisfaction whenever I desire it, and I can't stand being frustrated when I'm horny. Carol's must number 3. The marriage must last forever and never have significant problems, or else life is awful, terrible, and horrible. 3. Dispute your musts. Question and challenge those beliefs which are upsetting you. Once you've exposed your musts to the pitiless light of day, ruthlessly attack them. Okay, this is interesting. This is definitely a different way to think through some of this stuff, and I'm not sure I'm 100% convinced yet, but I don't have any concrete objections in my head for it. Well, let's see. For today, I'm thinking about my doing one thing every day this month. This is the second time I've sort of stopped to have to consider this goal for the month of having one thing each day that I do as if it's the last thing I'll do on the planet. Man, I'm just finding more reasons why that's either somewhere in between really difficult to impossible to do every single day. Like every single day there isn't something that fits into doing, like, unless I just have a default one of like, okay, if you have no, and maybe this is the answer. I think I just figured it out. If you have nothing else important happening today that deserves doing it as if it's the last thing that you do on the planet, maybe you should just have a default one that takes in its place of spend time with X family member. Spend time with your wife like it's the last thing you're going to do. Spend time with your kid like it's the last thing it's going to do. Maybe that's the solution. There's nothing wrong with just adding spend time with loved one to the list if there's nothing else super important for the day. That sounds like a good idea in and of itself. Never mind. So the problem I was going to think about today was just solved. See how useful this think time is? All right. So today's kind of one of those days, I think, where I've kind of hit the end of a long list of to-dos that I've been working on for like several months. And I kind of want to take the day off, so to speak, and just do stuff like, I don't know, maybe I'll stream some video games later or something. And in fact, I think I will over on the Disentall channel. I'll stream some video games today just for fun, just to take the day off. And then and because this is a good example, like, what am I going to do? Play video games like it's the last thing I'm going to do? I mean, that would be some intense ass video games. But you know what I mean? It doesn't really fit with that. So I think, I will pick a family member and give them super amounts of attention today. We'll see how that goes. All right, guys, I will see you tomorrow. Have a great day.